shutdown in the U.S. government. That's what officially started on Friday night and was still going when we produced this show. That's first today on CNN 10. Congress and the president have to agree on funding for the U.S. government for all of its offices to stay open. They haven't. Their latest deadline to do this was Friday night. And though the House of Representatives passed a measure last week to keep the government funded temporarily, that measure failed in the Senate, and Democrats and Republicans spent the weekend blaming each other for the roadblock. Republicans control both chambers of Congress and the White House, so Democrats believe voters will blame Republicans for the shutdown. But the Republican majority in the Senate is slim. They hold 51 seats to the Democrats' 49. And Republicans believe Democrats will be blamed because they filibustered. They moved against legislation that would have kept the government open, and there weren't enough votes in the Senate to overcome the filibuster. So why did Democrats filibuster? Before they approved the budget, they want an agreement to be reached on what happens to 700,000 people who came or were brought to the U.S. illegally as children. Republicans don't want to negotiate on that until enough Democrats vote to reopen the government first. So yesterday afternoon, both sides were dug in. Most Americans are not directly affected by a government shutdown, but those who are face some uncertainty.
Roughly 1.9 million government workers would be considered essential and stay on the job. Air traffic controllers, security officers, food inspectors, prison guards. Social security checks would go out, the post office would be open, but at a steep price to many workers.
The military will still go to work. They will not get paid. Okay? The border will still be patrolled. They will not get paid.
Meanwhile, many services would be stopped or delayed. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention would back down its flu tracking program, even as the nation faces the worst outbreak in years. Some senior nutrition programs would be paused. 200,000 passport applications went unprocessed in 1995. Congress funds much of the scientific research done in this country. In 2013, that meant some experiments went on hold and suffered costly losses of data. And in space that same year, for more than 2 weeks, NASA reportedly stopped monitoring potentially dangerous asteroids. A big one, by the way, is expected to brush by Earth on February 4th.
Activists and protesters, Hollywood stars, and politicians turned out in cities worldwide over the weekend for what's called the Women's March. The first one, also a massive event, was held a year ago on the weekend when U.S. President Donald Trump was inaugurated. And many of this year's demonstrators, like those in the first Women's March, protested against the election and the policies of the U.S. leader. President Trump tweeted that people should march to celebrate America's economic success over the past year and the lowest female unemployment in 18 years. Other issues of the march included sexual harassment. Recently, there's been a wave of accusations against politicians, entertainers, and members of the media. Religious freedom, immigration, women's rights, and equality were also addressed by hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children who marched in America. 10-second trivia. Most cars on the road today have what level of autonomous technology? None, partial, conditional, or high automation? The vast majority of today's cars are still at level 0, meaning they have no automation and that the driver is in ultimate control at all times. And that's even if they have blind spot monitoring or emergency braking systems. But manufacturers are moving toward making cars with more autonomy. And one big argument for that is safety. The U.S. government estimates that 94% of deadly car crashes are because of human error, and that driverless cars could significantly reduce that. But what if they're hacked?
We all carry computers in our pockets, and everyday machines like thermostats, refrigerators, cameras, and even our cars are connected online. Experts call this constant connection the Internet of Things. And just like everything else, it's susceptible to security breaches. The two big questions that I have: could autonomous vehicles be hacked to hurt us? And how can we be sure that the personal data that we produce in these cars are protected? The answers are still not perfectly clear.
The Internet of Things is going to have enormous benefits that I think we can't even begin to realize. The power of computerizing and networking our environment. But there are risks also. Here we are creating an internet that senses, thinks, and acts. What we know about computers and software is that they have bugs, they have vulnerabilities. All computer systems can be hacked. So you can easily imagine these attacks being used against cars to cause the car computer systems to crash, or cars being used as the attack vector. So as we build autonomous systems that affect the world in a direct physical manner, we risk bad actors doing it. We risk glitches and errors causing physical harm.
Using cars as weapons is unfortunately already a tactic used around the world. The good news is that perhaps far into the future, properly functioning autonomous cars won't allow humans to hit people. It could neutralize this tactic of terrorism. But if the cars can be controlled remotely or hacked and programmed to cause harm, it could bring on a whole new set of issues. To see what's being done to make these systems more secure, I visited a company that actually started out in the video game industry. NVIDIA now also makes the graphic processing chips that go into driverless cars.
We've developed an artificial intelligent brain for the car.
And how they build those chips will have major impacts on the safety of future driverless cars.
What we're building is a computer first, and then the car is built around it. We're essentially building a map of the world in real time based on what we sense. We had cameras, ultrasonic sensors, radars, LiDAR, which is a laser scanner, and each of those sensors are generating a massive amount of data.
Data collection is crucial for allowing these cars to function. But like security, it also raises questions about how the information gathered from our personal lives will be used. The new technology has the attention of privacy advocates like Lauren Smith at the Future of Privacy Forum in Washington, D.C., a group that explores issues with all sorts of home gadgets, like Amazon Echo's Alexa system, drones, even smart dolls.
Alexa, are you spying on me?
I only send audio back to Amazon when I hear you say the wake word.
And now, autonomous cars.
It's important that people start to think about their cars in the same way that they think about their computer or smartphone. So if you use a technology like this that relies on connectivity, that relies on data inputs and outputs, you are creating sort of an information trail.
You know, data has good and bad uses. There's some very powerful reasons to collect data about us and our society and put it together so we can do research, we can better deliver services. Smart government is the wave of the future. But the same data can be used for surveillance, for control. I don't really think any government is prepared for the Internet of Things and what it's going to do. I mean, these are computers that affect the world in a direct physical manner. And there are risks to life and property. I mean, largely, Western governments have taken a very hands-off view to regulation of the Internet, the United States especially. And that worked great when it didn't matter. When it was data, when it was a spreadsheet, when it was conversation. But when it's a car, when it's a medical device, when it's an appliance, when it can actually do physical harm, that changes everything.
Okay, so let's pretend a freezer malfunctions and continues making ice long after the tray is full. That might look a bit like what happened recently in Ohio, except that in this case, the freezer was the Arctic and the tray was Lake Erie. Ice shoves, or ice tsunamis, form when winds blow ice across a lake and onto its shores, where it piles up and forms mountains of ice. Some hills here grew to be more than 30 feet high. If they're not fans of Frozen, the locals better hope it stops. Or Elsa. Sure, some fans may find it air and delightful, but it's hard to conceal don't feel when a lakeshore crystallizes like an icy blast, potentially causing an Olaf of problems, unless of course the cold doesn't bother you anyway. I'm Azuz for CNN 10.